Let's begin with watching an animation. When you look at this animation, the title is The Sound Collector. Make sure that you pay attention to, of course, the story. You know, how it begins, how the story develops, and whether there are turning points, 转捩点 or not, and then how it ends. Okay, and also make sure that you pay attention to the characters. You know, how the characters are different from one another, whether there are contrasts between the characters. And of course, you can also pay attention to the images, the visual images, you know, used to present the setting and the characters. Okay, and finally, maybe you can also pay attention to the narrator of the film, the narrator, 叙述者, you know, who is telling the story. Okay, and what position this storyteller takes. Okay, so these are the elements. We're not watching the film just for fun. So I hope that you pay attention to the details. Okay, let's take a look at the animation now. Reflect on the introduction, the beginning part of this film. You know, what do you see in the beginning? And try to remember that the title is called The Sound Collector. So here you get the characters, the adults, the children, and their voices. Okay, so how are the children different from the adults? And what role does the bee play in this film? We can start with analyzing the two brothers. First we have Leonard, which is the younger brother, and then Samuel, the older brother. So here, do you see any contrast between the two brothers? Yes, some of you nod your head.
The younger brother is very immeasurable. He imagined every sound can be helicopter, lion, or even Omen can be the castle with armor. So, but his older brother just listened to his younger brother, and gradually his older brother become interested in that.
Okay, very good. So I think that you do catch this, that there is a difference between the two brothers. The younger brother is more imaginative, and then he associates different sounds with different elements of a story. You know, he makes up a story with the sounds. At the beginning, the older brother is interested. So at the beginning, the older brother finds Leonard a dreamer. Okay, and then another complaint he has about Leonard is that he doesn't collect things. You know, children like to possess something, and Samuel has a lot of seashells with him, but then Leonard has nothing. So he does not like to play with Leonard because, you know, he will not be able to trade something with him. But on the other hand, Leonard indeed is more imaginative. Okay, so these are the very obvious contrast you see at the beginning between the two brothers. How about the brothers and the parents or the adults? Do you see any differences between the children and the adults? Anyone? Shall I get your names? How about Kelly? Where is Kelly? Do you see any differences between the adults and the children? Could you, pass the mic.
I think that adults has no, they lost the ability to imagine. Yes.
Yeah, probably me too. Because adults are busy. You know, sometimes they get preoccupied with their duties, the daily matters, or the rest they need. Like the father, you know, is very interested in taking a nap. Okay, so they don't have the free time to play games, and then they don't seem to be imaginative. Okay, so these are the contrasts we see between the two sets of characters. Okay, so how about the plot, 情节? Do you find any turning point in this story? When does the brother gets interested, the older brother gets interested in the games of sound? When? Okay, what's your name? Could you pass the mic to, what's your name? Ken. Okay. Got it.
The brother say, hey, you can trade with my shell. But his brother, older brother, get convinced. He gave one to his younger brother, and his younger brother told his older brother, you listen, you can listen the sounds of ocean.
Yeah.
And his older brother said, wow, amazing, and gradually he
because Leonard associate the sound. I think I do agree that if you listen to the seashell, you hear ocean. Because the echo in the seashell feels like the sound of ocean. Okay, and then Leonard associated with shipwreck, with I forgot something else, and then he started to a fisher, one fishing, etc. And then the older brother gets interested. Okay, so this is how you can start to pay attention to the beginning of the story and then the beginning of the action. Usually we get more interested in the story when the action begins. Okay, because there are more movements, there are more changes. We tend to want to know what happened next. Sometimes the beginning can be slow because it introduces the setting. The two characters, the four characters, the family setting, the house, etc. So sometimes in the beginning is a bit like warm up. It prepares you for the central action. Okay, so here the action begins when they start to listen to the seashell. Okay, at first Samuel is dismissive. One good thing about reading literature is that sometimes you also get some expressions that you can use in daily life, like take a hike, means go away. Okay, cut it out, Leonard, means that just stop it. Okay, so these are the kind of dismissive expressions Leonard uses to show that he's not interested in the game. And at the same time, we hear that the mother, is all concerned with the housekeeping stuff, shutting the window to keep the rain away, boiling the water, etc. And then when Leonard says, you can hear the ocean, and then Samuel gets interested, and we see the action begins. He hears the father's rocking chair, the rocking of the chair, and then he says that, it's a robber. On sneaky shoes, walking around the corner. Okay, so children, they are able to associate. They are sensitive to sound, and then associate the sound to something else. Okay, and something more fantastic, maybe more dramatic. And then the sound of the seashell, story about submarine, about a shipwreck, a guy fishing. So this is something we can tell, through which we can tell the difference between Samuel and Leonard, because at this point, the dog rushes through, and then the mother's passenger pants drop, and then Samuel just said that, it's the guy fishing up the possum pants, but Leonard is indeed more imaginative in the sense of producing a fantasy story, a story with fantastic plot. Okay, and he said, okay, so this is not possum pants, is a suit of armor. Okay, so here this is where the story they invent start to roll. Okay, we have a story within the story, so this is where this story begins. And then Leonard says that, as soon as he puts on the armor, then up pops the castle. And Samuel asks, where do you get the castle? where is the sound to produce the castle? And then Leonard said, this is a toaster. Okay, and actually the mother is there making the lunch. Okay, so Leonard is picking up the sound they have in daily life to produce a fantasy story. And then the father, who is just waking up, is still in his sleeping robe. Okay, and then he's brushing his teeth and gargling. And I forgot which one. Either Leonard or Seymour says, oh, this is the monster, guarding the castle. Okay, and then the water boiling. I believe this is an association made by Leonard. Okay, the water boiling. And then Seymour asks, then what do you make of that? And then Leonard said, oh, it's a monster or a dragon or a Dracula, with a toothache. Okay, and this is really funny because, we don't think that Dracula, who likes to suck blood, will have a toothache. Okay, because of the screaming, the boiling sound, the squeaking and screaming sound of the water boiling, he says, oh, this is a Dracula with a toothache. Okay, so I think this is where a kind of childish imagination becomes cute and really free. We adults, or maybe I as an adult, would not make this association. Okay. And then because the bee flies around in the house, and then Leonard continues to make the plot about the relation between this guy and the monster or the Dracula. And he says, oh, this guy is a dentist. So he is fixing the teeth of the Dracula by drilling the teeth. Okay, and then the drilling sound is the sound of the bee. Again, this is cute because dentists don't drill our teeth, right? Okay, maybe, when we have cavities, 蛀牙, dentists will drill and, take out the cavity, the decay part. Okay, but the drilling sound is too consistent to be like what the dentist does. Okay, this is just a childhood imagination, a child's imagination. For a child, this is what the dentist does. Okay, just drilling and drilling and drilling. Okay, and then finally, the telephone. And then Leonard again continues with developing the plot to say that this is a. At first, Leonard does not want to include the telephone. You can tell that here the two brothers are making a story together, and the older brother Samuel is trying to, include the different sounds. And at first, Leonard does not want to include the telephone, and then he goes along with the older brother and say that, oh, maybe this is a wife calling, okay, and the wife is riding a helicopter to try to rescue this guy, and the helicopter sound is from the egg beater. Okay, so this is how they make the plot, and then. And then this is where the sky clears up, the rain stops, and Leonard loses interest. And then he said, oh, the end. Okay, but Seymour is not willing to end it like this. He's not satisfied with such an easy ending. Not really dramatic. Okay, it's a bit like cliche. Just too easy an ending. So Seymour continues to listen and then to try to get a better ending. So he says that the dentist turns into a lion and scares the Dracula away. So this is how the story ends according to Seymour. Okay, so I kind of fill you in with the details. What do you think about Seymour and Leonard, and about their ways of dealing with the story? Okay, maybe we can get another or maybe two to try to talk about the two brothers here. Who wants to volunteer?
The entire film rather interesting because it gives you an insight on how siblings interact with each other, and how Seymour can keep persisting on the plot and insisting on an ending. and how Leonard just loses interest and he goes and looks out of the window, and then I like the end because how Leonard, like, he picked up another interest, but also it's got to do with how he imagines things, and that's I thought that was a great way of like linking the previous story of the sounds with maybe another sequel.
Right. What is he interested in at the end?
The clouds making different shapes.
Yeah. You know, trying to imagine different shapes out of the changes of the cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah. So indeed, this again is an example of how children have keen senses. You know, they are very sensitive to sounds, to shapes, you know, to changes in the environment. And sometimes their ways of describing the changes, you know, are different from ours. And sometimes we can be more literal, 用字面的意思去解释. And they can use their own language, you know, which is a language maybe of fairy tale or fantasies, legends, etc. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? This is where we can try to be free in our analysis. You can try to describe their personalities by using the persons you know. Like just now we it was Stephanie, yeah, who associates Leonard to her sister, her younger sister. So, I think that's one way to do it. You know, I think in this class, on the one hand, we try to understand literature better. On the other hand, we try to use it to understand our world and the people around us. So you can talk about the types of peoples they belong to. Like Leonard seems to be a certain type, and then Seymour another type, and maybe the parents, you know, the third type. Yeah. Or you know, you can start with telling us which of the characters you like the best.
I think the sharpest contrast is just that Leonard's more imaginative and his older brother is rather dull on the other hand. And in real life, I am kind of like Seymour. And my little sister is kind of like Leonard. I usually just go about doing my own business, doing my own things, and my sister sometimes can just be really annoying, but when I settle down, get to know what she's talking about, I find it rather interesting. And so, as we can see from the story, Leonard knows how to find some fun from boredom. It's raining outside, so it's raining outside, so the brothers can't go outside to play, and so Leonard thinks up something fun, like using sounds and imagining a story, while his brother just cares about his shell and in short, Seymour is a bit superficial, and Leonard, while only 6 years old, shows great maturity, I guess.
Okay. Many good points. For instance, how children, although they look childish, you know, sometimes reveal some great things about life. Okay, they may not be telling the truth, but you know, they help us appreciate life from different angles, from some new angles. You know, some ways we didn't expect before. So that's one thing. But do you agree that Seymour is dull and superficial? I no, let me tell you this. In interpreting this story, literary text, or even your life, no, there's no correct answer. There are just different perspectives, and you can be totally justified as long as you give evidence. So that your interpretation of a person, of a text, is not just a kind of rash judgment, without trying to understand them. Okay, so as long as you have evidence, as long as you know how to analyze them, you are free to have your own interpretations. Okay, so does anyone want to disagree with Weber? I think apparently Leonard is the focus. Leonard is more appealing. He is the central character. But honestly, when I watch it again this time, I don't think Samuel is negative. So you can try to disagree with Weber if you want. Any interpretations? Any volunteer?
I think I disagree, because I wouldn't exactly say that Seymour is superficial. Maybe a little bit self-centered, because he seems about maybe 12, I think, in the film. And I think children at that age they normally think only about themselves and what happens around them and their friends and what their friends are interested in. So maybe he thinks that his brother, Leonard, is too immature for him, and he doesn't want to associate with him, and he doesn't actually want to have anything in common with his younger brother, because he thinks it's childish and not fit for his age. Yeah.
So in other words, Samuel is still a child, who is trying to grow up. So at a certain age, a child wants to be like an adult, and that's why he wants to make himself different from Leonard. He would have hoped to go out and play with his friends, I believe. Usually, at a certain stage of our socialization, 社会化, we like to have more friends outside, and we like to go away from the family sometimes.